Hello, this is Angela Anderson. Thanks for joining me for this, well, not acrylics. I'm going to be doing watercolors tonight. I almost said it. Watercolor tutorial. Yeah, we're doing a little twist on our normal tutorials. Usually I paint in acrylics, but I thought we would try out some watercolors. I've been kind of dabbling in them over the last couple of years, so I'm still very new to it, but yeah, I'll show you what I've learned, and we're going to do some really easy projects tonight. Got my husband Mark with me.
Hey there, everybody.
He's the man in chat, so you can ask questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer. I don't know. We'll see. Let's get started. Alrighty, so this is an example of kind of what we're going to shoot for tonight. I'm going to do some really simple watercolor butterflies and kind of try to embrace the messy part of watercolors, which I really love. I've been painting with acrylics since the 1980s. That really ages me, but you know, over 30-something years. And I'm really comfortable with them. I kind of know what they can work, what they're going to do, and I can paint really realistic with them. With watercolors, since it's such a new medium to me, and such a beginner, and I'm still kind of learning about them, I'm much more comfortable just like embracing them as a different medium and embracing the messy parts of them that I love. And if you look at licensing in watercolors and things, products and stores and things, a lot of them will have these kind of backwashes and things that professional watercolor artists that are really serious about it, that are like, well, I shouldn't say that. There's some professional watercolorists that obviously embrace the messy, and others that are going for realism, I should say, who make sure that everything's really nice and smooth and everything is like, you know, just perfectly applied. And that's not what I'm trying to do with this. So just to qualify right off the bat, we're going to embrace the messy, all of these backwashes and things that, you know, may be considered mistakes. In watercolor, we're going to kind of try to, I'll show you how I like to kind of play with them and try to achieve those kind of things, and have some really a fun time with it. I've had so much fun doing these really simple shaped butterflies, and also our little bunny. So we're going to work on him, do some really simple flowers, and yeah, we'll see how much we can get done tonight. But one thing I want to say before we start is I did my examples in my Strathmore Visual Journal, which is a mixed media paper. You could use watercolor paper, obviously, but this mixed media paper, which is my normal visual journal that I use with my acrylics, also works for this. So if you've already got one of these, you can just use it. And the paper doesn't warp too bad as long as you don't add too much water to it. You can see it's kind of got a little warping, but it does it anytime I add any kind of water to the paper. It's not a super thick paper. If you want to have less warping and more of a permanent type of thing that you can like maybe hang in a frame or something like that, you could get yourself one of these more expensive Arches. This one is my Arches Travel Journal watercolor book, and it is hot pressed. The difference between hot pressed and cold pressed papers, which this one's cold pressed, is the way they finish the paper. This hot pressed paper is going to be smoother, and the cold pressed paper is going to have a lot of texture. And depending on how, you know, textured you like it, you can choose whichever one you want. But 140 pound is like the bare minimum that I would get in a watercolor paper. Choose one that is 100% cotton for our best results. This paper here from the Strathmore is also 100% cotton already, so that's nice. And that's one of the reasons that it works so well with the watercolors. If you don't use 100% cotton paper, it can act a little bit differently. It'll still work, but I would just say if you can afford it, I would get the good paper for watercolors. It really does kind of make a difference. So we'll set those aside.
You are pretty strong.
What?
You are pretty strong. Because that one green book has 15 sheets at 140 pounds a sheet. That's like 2,100 pounds.
I know.
You've been working out.
I'm benching a lot here.
Jeez.
All right, so I'm going to set these aside. what are you talking about? Okay.
Subscribe.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta subscribe with those kind of jokes. Come on.
All right, as far as brushes go, I did my examples with water brushes. So you do not need to go out and buy fancy brushes for this. I use these Pentel water brushes. This one is a flat and this one is a round tip. And they work just fine for, you know, for what we're doing, like the quality of what we're doing. You don't need like fancy brushes, but I do have some nicer brushes that I'll be using tonight. And I'll probably use these ones here, like a few sizes of round and an angle brush. And this one is the Aqua Elite from Princeton. This one is the Neptune line from Princeton that has the kind of more natural synthetic. It's a faux synthetic. I think I want to say squirrel hair maybe. And then a 3-round and a 5-round in the Velvet Touch here, and then the Heritage, which they're both kind of just a tack-on synthetic brush. All right. So those will be the brushes that I'm mostly going to use tonight. Let me go over my palette really quick. I have a bunch of different watercolors laid out on this palette, and it's kind of messy. I added a bunch more, and then I'm like, where am I going to mix? So if you have a bigger pan, it's probably better, or have your pans separated into one of these kind of type tins, or you know, one of these you've seen where you've got your pan separated, and then the lid can be a mixing thing too, so you could use that. This is a ceramic plate here, so any of that will work for your palette. Okay, I'll just quickly go over my colors that I've got on my palette, and I've kind of roughly swatched them out in the order that they're in. So here I'll just like put it up there so you can kind of do a quick screenshot if you want to go back to it and refer to it. But we've got lemon yellow, Hansa yellow medium, cadmium yellow deeper, maybe that's new Gamboge, I'm not sure. Naples yellow, quinacridone burnt scarlet, or quinacridone burnt orange in some cases, quinacridone gold, Pyrrol orange, Pyrrol scarlet, opera pink, quinacridone rose, quinacridone lilac. This one is a color called Rhodontite, amethyst, tundra violet, Perylene violet, naphthalide maroon, Jane's gray, transparent brown oxide, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, phthalo turquoise, cobalt teal, green apatite, and cascade green. And then on the inner ring, we've got buff titanium, Naples yellow reddish, gray titanium, potter's pink, burnt sienna, lavender, Indian red, bloodstone, pyrrolite, mahogany, and goethite. The pyrrolite, amethyst, and rhodontite, and there's I think 2 other colors all came in a set together from Daniel Smith. They're like the earth colors or something like that. So that's a nice granulating color. Pyrrolite is one of my favorite colors. I've already replaced it with the bigger tube because I ran out of the smaller tube. So that's one that I would highly recommend. The Pyrrolite is the color of this butterfly that I did on the top here. And you can see what that color does. It granulates out, and granulating just means that the colors separate, like it has different pigments, and some settle and some lift, and so you get these kind of like speckled looking things happening. So you can see it's got like a pink and a brown in here, in that color, Pyrrolite. So that is definitely one of my favorite colors. Tundra violet, another one that I really like. That one is a Schminke color. And all right, so I'll talk about the butterflies later when we get to that, but I'm going to go ahead and start on our bunny because I want to be able to get some of this stuff done tonight. I've also got another set over here off to the side, in my travel palette. That is my favorite granulating colors. Some of these are in this palette, but most of them are kind of different colors. So we might be pulling from this one too. I don't know, but I put it out mainly to have the little mixing trays. All right. So if I use those colors, I'll mention them as we use them. All right, let's get going here. I've already sketched out my bunny on a larger piece of the Arches paper. This one is the cold pressed. Whoops, sorry. That was a practice bows thing I was doing. Yeah. So this one is a block, and the sides are glued down, so it's not going to warp as much. And then you've got a little slot back here where you can stick a palette knife in and break it off once you're done. So you can slide the palette knife around to loosen it up and get it loose from the paper. So I've kind of sketched a little. This was like a bunny out of my own imagination. I did not have a reference photo, so he turned out a little cartoony looking. So I went ahead and found a photo of a bunny that was, you know, look a little bit more realistic. What? I do like the other one too, though. Yeah, no, I do like him. I don't want to diss our bunny. And I've sketched it out with a color erase terracotta pencil. And then what we can do is, it really doesn't matter with watercolors. You can use regular pencil. I don't usually use pencil when I paint with acrylics, because I don't like to have the graphite shown through. But with watercolor, you can use just regular pencil, and then very lightly erase. I just erased a little bit that was like on my white section. But on the lines themselves, you can use a kneaded eraser and just kind of lightly press and lift, and you can see how it kind of took off the darkest of my lines. And try not to rub on the paper too much if you do have to erase, because it can kind of make your watercolors do funny things if you damage the paper surface, like the texture of the paper. So I'm just going to lightly go through here and remove most of my lines. I just kind of wanted it drawn out so I had a little bit of a reference, and I'm just setting it down and lifting. I'm not rubbing with this. Okay, that's good enough. Got off most of my texture. You probably can't see it very much, sorry, but that'll be good. Okay. One thing I want to talk about before we start is just kind of some basic watercolor techniques. So I'm going to be talking about things like wet on wet and different things, and I'm just going to like show you what I mean before we start, and then that way when I get to doing it on the canvas, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm going to have a large water up here to rinse my brush out in, and then if I need clean water, I'm going to use this one. So 2 waters is nice to have. All right, so I've got my clean water here, and I'm just going to do what's called wet on wet. So I'm going to wet my paper down. And this is my, this is a piece out of my visual journal notebook, so it's not going to have any texture or anything, but I'm going to show you wet on wet. And if I want to, and this is what we're going to do with our butterfly, if I want it to kind of move across the paper, I want to wet it down pretty good, but not so that it's dripping. So you can see that it's shiny, but it doesn't have drips or anything. And if I put my color on one side and then just kind of start to blend it down, it's going to start to get lighter as it comes down here. Now, at this end part here, where I want it to blend out into nothing, I'm going to kind of rinse out my brush and dab it on the paper towel so it's not super wet. I don't want to add water to this because the water is going to push into other areas. So I'm going to just come to where it ends and pull it down a little bit. And in order to kind of erase these lines, what I can do is go over the whole thing and start up here again and then pull all the way down to where I want it to go out. And that's how I've learned. And if I've got a little thing there, then I can kind of wipe my brush off and blend off. You blend with a damp brush, not a wet brush. So, and then if I wanted to have it darker up here, I could let this dry and go back over it again. But at this point, I probably wouldn't add any more color to it because then it's not going to blend evenly. Now, if I don't care about that and I want to just go ahead and add some water and maybe make it do some fun effects, what I can do is add a little bit more wet color to this wherever I want. It doesn't matter. This is called charging. So once you've got a color layer down, you can charge it with any other color. I'm just going to use the same color, but I'm going to dab it in different parts of around the area. And you can see what it's going to do. It's going to push into your other areas. And you can use this to do all kinds of different effects. And this is what we'll do on our butterflies when we want to do our spots and things like that. If I want to really concentrate at one end and maybe, you know, get that color to push, I can do that. And then I can kind of tilt my paper and try to get it to come down. I can add water, just straight water in places and make it run. Now this is already pretty dry, so it's not moving very much for me. But if I want it to move more, what I can do is wet the area that I want it to move into, and then it'll run down into those other areas. I can also sop up, you know, some of this if I don't want it that wet. And anywhere where you've got like a really obvious puddle, it will dry with a ring around it. So if I've got an area where you can see that that paint is puddling like that, if I leave that to dry in that way, when it dries, it's going to dry with a little hard line all the way around the edge. That's just kind of how watercolors work. So if you don't want that, what you would do is you would sop up your excess. If you don't want a hard line, if you just want it to kind of look like it does now, it'll obviously dry a little bit lighter, but that's something to watch out for too, okay? Again, we're kind of going to sort of break the rules with this. We're not going to worry too much about it, but these are going to be the main things that I'll be using tonight when we're painting. Dropping water in and doing a lot of charging and moving things around, okay? So wet on wet and charging. All right. I might do a little lifting, which would be when the paint is almost dry, you go back in with a brush and kind of lift out some color and things like that. That works best with colors that are not staining, and the tubes of the paint will tell you if they're staining or not. All right, let's stop talking and just get to painting here. Mark's like already, he's like, come on, do it. Alrighty. All right, so what I want to do is kind of prime my area of my bunny that I want to paint in with water so that when I put my paint down, it kind of moves around really nicely for me. So I'm going to do the ears and the face area with just water to start with. And woo, it's red. I did not clean out my brush really good. That's all right. And I'm going to use a fairly good amount of water because this paint will, this paper will really soak it up. So I'm going to lay on a fairly good amount of water. I'm going to avoid the kind of inner part of the ears for now. Our bunny is going to be pink. That's okay. And I'm going to avoid the eyes because those will be black later. I mean, it really wouldn't hurt to paint over them since they're, I guess I'll paint over them. It doesn't matter now that I think about it. All right, so we'll do that. Just paint in the whole face pink. Our bunny is pink.
So,
All right, and then I'm going to use an earthy color. So it can be gray, it can be like yellow oxide. I'm going to use Goethite. That was the color that I used in my example. It's a brown oxide color. Really cool color. This is a Daniel Smith color. And I'm going to add some water to it and thin it out. I want to start with a fairly light texture to start with. And you can see as I drop it in, it's going to start moving around in those areas. It'll pretty much stay where the wet is, though. That's the nice thing about watercolor. I really like. It pretty much just stays where. If you've got a super textured paper, sometimes it'll kind of bleed out a little bit, but for the most part, it's going to stay where you put it. And I'm just going to tap in now and create some texture on the forehead area. And I haven't added color in a while, so it's going to start to lighten up as that pigment is gone from my brush. I'm going to kind of do it down the nose area here to darken up that area. And then a little bit kind of under the eye and around the sides of the face. And if your paint is getting dry, you can see like my brush strokes are showing. That means my paper is kind of getting dry, which is fine. You know, I just have to watch out for it. So I'm going to leave like this little kind of circular area around the mouth a little bit lighter. And kind of darken up the nose a little bit. Okay, now what I can do is come in here in my white area and maybe I'll put in some of a lighter color like a buff titanium. Get a little bit more water here. And just let that bleed out into my Goethite a little bit. Now I'm going to do a little bit of lifting. So I'm going to go in here with some water and just kind of push that back. And maybe it'll even create a little bit of a bleed. When you add water, it can kind of like create these little fingers that kind of come up and push the paint around. So if we want that effect, we can drop in water to an area. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of lighten up around the eyes a little bit. Lifting off some of that color. And again, this only really works if you're using a color that isn't fully staining. If you have a color that, what I mean by staining is like some colors will penetrate into the paper and you won't be able to take them back off. Some colors with watercolors, they're not as staining, and so you can lift them back off. And the earth colors tend to be more easy to lift. So Goethite is one that lifts fairly easily. You can see it kind of was able to get it off that area. All right, so there we go. Oh, isn't he cute? He's so cute. Love it. All right, now I'm gonna do a little bit of this bottom part of the ear with this color. Kind of just connect it up there. And then for the inner part of the ear, I'm going to use some Potter's Pink or just any light red color. Potter's Pink is nice because it kind of granulates. I like granulating colors, just like the kind of fuzzy effects that they give. Now this color here is mostly dry at this point, so this pink will push into that color a little bit, but it shouldn't do too much. It should mostly stay where I put it. And one thing that you can do when you're adding color in is, like you can see right there, it's bleeding in. If you go more concentrated with the paint, so if you have your paint a little bit thicker, more like a cream texture versus a, you know, coffee or tea texture, if that makes sense, or like a buttery texture, or thicker on the paint, it won't move as much. So if you want your paint to kind of stay where you're putting it when you're charging like this, you're adding it into another area where it's already got, you know, it's already wet. If you use a thicker paint, not as watery, it won't move as much. It won't. So now I've got my paint down, and what I'm going to do is use my damp brush and just kind of guide where I want that blend to happen. So I'm going to kind of blend out. I don't want a wet brush because remember, if we add water, it'll kind of push the paint and create blooms, which, you know, you might want, but I don't want right now. At least not right here. Okay, that's going to look dark, but I think once it dries, it'll dry a little bit lighter. I'm going to go also use a little bit of pink around the nose. Right there. And just dab it. Wipe my brush off and softly blend. Gosh, I wish it was that easy to blend with acrylics, don't you? That's one thing I really love about this. They don't layer as well, but they do blend like a dream. It's crazy. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. I have a little bit of, yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and just dry it at this point. And, or actually, I can just do some flowers and come back. Well, no, I need to do the neck part. Let me do a little bit of goethite, and I'm going to add a gray for the neck. So I'm going to get some of this gray titanium. I might even add a little bit of the Jane's gray just to get a little bit darker color. I just want a contrast under the neck. And in my photographs of my bunny in this position, his head's kind of down, so you're not seeing his chin as much or at all. So I'm just going to go ahead and go under this chin area. It is bleeding out a little bit, but I can come back in and kind of correct it. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to pull it down to blend it in down here. And I just have kind of a damp brush. I'm not wetting my brush here. Okay. Now he moved up in here, so I'm going to just dab that off and wipe it off as I dab it off. Okay, there we go. Not bad. And then at the very bottom here, I'm just going to kind of add some water so that it softly blends out. And it's going to push into that area and kind of create some interesting blooms too. All right, I like it. He's cute. Let's get a little bit more of that dark gray. I'm going to put it kind of above the nose. And this time I'm kind of dabbing into damp. So it's kind of wet into damp instead of wet into wet. It's not going to move as much. And I'm going to put this color kind of around, this kind of gray color around the eye. And that'll help when I put the eye in to have a little bit of depth around the eye socket. Okay. I'm going to blend out a little bit of that blooming. It's getting a little too much for my liking. Okay. He looks like he's got a little shirt, doesn't he? It's so cute. Cute, cute, cute. All right. Now I'm going to get a little bit thicker goethite. And so go a little bit more concentrated. And this is where I'm going to use my brush to create some texture, some little brush strokes, simulated fur. Right, so if you wanted to, you could use like a grainier brush to really get some really fine textured hairs. I'm just gonna go for kind of a little bit chunkier look. And this is where I want it to be kind of damp but on the paper, but not too wet, because I want this to kind of mostly stay where I'm putting it. So I'm gonna kind of put it along the forehead and down a little bit. And then do a little bit more kind of above the nose there, just a little bit darker, maybe a little bit more sort of below that. But he looks like he's got a mohawk, doesn't he? Now that may be a little too dark, so I'm going to go back in with a damp brush and just kind of dab it over. Kind of try to push that around a little bit. There we go. And blend it out into the other areas. The damp brush is really your friend with watercolors. It really helps smooth things out, blend things in. Now I'm trying not to go too much into my light areas here, but I'm also trying to kind of create that little bit of a darker area around the face. I'm going to get my brush here and sort of lift out a little bit of that lighter color again. And make sure I've got kind of a light area on those cheeks. If you use a color that's really staining, you may not be able to do this, so just be careful and check it before you do your big project. Just check and make sure your colors that you're using can be lifted, because you'll want to go back in and kind of adjust give him this little light under his eyes there. Okay, oh, he's cute. All right, let's let that dry. It's got a lot of layers of paint on there, so we just need to let it kind of dry and do its thing. Add a little bit of light color there, and it dries a little bit darker too, so we may decide we need more coats once it dries. But let's go ahead and do some of the flowers. Now we want to make sure that this is kind of mostly dry down here before I do our flowers. But I think I'm not sure if I used quinacridone lilac, which is like a quinacridone magenta equivalent, or quinacridone rose there. I might use a little bit of both. And I'm going to start out with a very light touch. Now with these roses, I want to do these in very loosely and leave lots of white. So I'm going to choose petals to do, and I'm just going to set my brush down and kind of wiggle it and lift. Set it down, wiggle it and lift. And as I get towards the center, I'm going to start leaving more and more little white bits. between them and get smaller and smaller, like that. Okay, then I'm going to charge into this with some more concentrated color. So I'm going to just pick some of these petals and just dab in some darker color and let it bleed out. And that's how I'll do those roses. Okay, so let's do another one. They're really fun to do, but start light. We can maybe even do a little potter's pink since we had it in the ears. Probably be good to have some of that color in our roses down here. You can start in the center too if you want, with some concentrated color, and then lighten up as you go out. Look at roses to see their anatomy. They do the kind of like bricks. So you've got 2 here and 1 here. So each of the petals is building 1, 2, and then 1 there. Makes sense. And then in the center, you've just got kind of these like little tiny semicircles. And then as you come out, you're overlapping. So I've got 2 petals here meeting. I'm going to do another one there, right? It's 2 petals here meeting. Going to do another one kind of in between. And just kind of tuck them in where you can fit them. So here I would do one kind of like that. And then here, do one like that. That kind of bridges between them. And then here I've got 2 meeting. I'm going to do one there like that. All right?
Easy.
Yeah. They don't have to be perfectly symmetrical or, anything. In fact, I kind of find with flowers that the less is better, less is more if you let them be. They look a little bit more natural than if you're really fussy with them and try to get them to look a certain way, especially with watercolors. It's funny because with acrylics I find flowers to be one of the easiest things, and with watercolors I find them to be a little bit trickier for me because I want to overdo them. I just tend to go in and do too much. So trying to hold back here. So those colors that I charged in kind of bled out everywhere, so I'm going to do it again here to try to get it to a little bit darker. Okay. Fun. And then we can do some purpley. I'll get my amethyst and some lavender. How are we doing on time? Okay, not bad. Trying to give it about an hour for the bunny and an hour for the butterflies. The butterflies won't take an hour. They're pretty fast, depending on how many we do. And then let's just do some simple daisy shapes or some like asters or something like that. So I'm just gonna do some little spiky and leave the centers open. I don't know where my third one is supposed to go. Maybe here. Okay. I'm trying to kind of mash them together as much as I can without getting too close. Let's get some green. I'm going to use the green Apatite. It's kind of a yellowy green that's got some nice granulation. And put a few leaves in here. And I'm just going to set my brush down, kind of smush it down, and then pull to get my little leafy shapes. And let's use a little bit, kind of some cobalt teal or another kind of green. And sometimes they'll touch, and that's, you know, if it touches, it might bleed in to your flowers. Now, if you absolutely do not want that, then what you can do is wait till the flower dries completely. I've got a little bit of transfer on my dog. Really. I know, it's so boring.
If you could sit in your lap while you're painting.
He tried the other day. It was thunderstorming on Tuesday or Thursday last week, and he was in my lap for a part of it. I had to kind of cut it short because he was just being a distraction. All right, I'm going to do a little bit more watery, thinner. And just do some small little leaves. Just dab in little shapes around to kind of fill in. You could do colors for this. You don't have to do it green. But just kind of filling it in around with some little foliage bits.
What is the brush that you're using right now?
I'm using the Princeton Neptune 8, number 8. And I think I'm going to switch to a little bit smaller brush for the next part because I want to do some little dots there. And we'll just decide what color we want them to be. Maybe we'll do them yellow since we're going to do some yellow in the centers of it, but we'll do like a creamy yellow that's like a Naples yellow. I like it. It's kind of soft. It's not as harsh as some other yellows. It looks a little bit more natural, which I think it'll look good with our bunny too. Okay, that's nice. Just some little dots, tabs. Okay. And if we wanted to do like maybe a little deeper gold, we can get a little bit of the quinacridone gold and drop that into a few of these to darken it up in some places. Okay. Fun. Easy, easy. Okay, let's get a little bit of that lilac, quinacridone lilac. And I'm going to go in now with the second coat on some of these roses and just kind of do some little finishing touches. A little bit deeper color. I'm kind of going in the same areas that I was before, but just sort of picking some spots to add some color. Now, if I want to blend those in, I use a damp brush and just kind of add some water where I want that paint to flow into and let it kind of blend out a little bit. I'm not adding water to this. I've just got a damp brush, so I'm just kind of wetting the paper, but I'm not dropping water into it because I don't want, the water would kind of wash it away, do weird things to it. And this one I'm going to leave alone, I think. Just kind of making the centers sort of a little bit darker. And then those lavender are pretty much dry, so let's go ahead and let's use this same yellows that we used over here. So we'll use that Naples yellow for the centers. And then I'll drop in some Quin Gold too. Maybe drop it in around the outside. Okay, we'll let that set. All right, I'm going to get some Indian brown or Indian red, or just a darker, like a brown. You can add your like lilac color to your gray or lilac and a burnt umber or burnt sienna, just anything like that. I have this Indian red color, but you may not have it. So if you don't, you can kind of mix up something similar. I'm just gonna use it to add a little bit detail to my nose there. Just a little bit darker color. Separate out the mouth and the nose. It's kind of a little bit wider through the middle and then kind of tapers out. And then it kind of curves up, so I'm going to wipe most of that out and sort of just curve it up just a little bit right there and there with just a damp brush. Okay. And then I want it to bleed out a little bit, so I'm going to just wet sort of back here. Wipe that out and lift off. Don't want it super red all the way up. Okay, there we go. And then for the eyes, I'm going to use the Jane's Gray. And you can do this a couple of ways. So on my example, I actually used a pen to draw in the eye and the nose and the whiskers detailed. But if you want to use the brush, I'll show you how to do that. So, and I'm going to have to leave my highlights if I don't want to have to put those back in with white gouache. So I'm going to try to leave a little bit of a highlight area.
So, do you have
either eye. What?
Do you have a preference of acrylics over watercolors?
I like them both. I mean, obviously acrylics are my number one go-to. It's what I use and have used for years. I don't think I will switch to watercolors for anything but special projects where I feel like the watercolors do a better job. Just some things are just adding a little bit dark kind of around to set those eyes in and giving them a little bit of a, maybe not that much of an eyelash. I like that the way they blend. I like, some things about them. I find them a little harder to control at times, and then at times, easier. So they both have their own kind of special qualities. Use some water here and lift out the area of the eye where I want it highlighted, and I'm going to have to use gouache in here to really get it as light as I want it.
And do you know?
Trying to pull out those eyelashes there. I'm making the eye a little bit bigger so it looks cuter too. What do I know what?
If Jane's gray is like Payne's gray.
It's burnt sienna and burnt umber. Or no, burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Payne's gray is black and ultramarine blue. So Jane's gray is a little softer because it's got burnt sienna instead of black. But they both have ultramarine blue in them. All right, so I'm gonna go back in with that darker color and we'll just let that set. And you can see I kind of made it bleed around the eye a little bit, maybe a little too much, but I kind of wanted it soft around the eye. So I sort of deliberately bled it out because I don't like it when it looks too perfect. I did the same thing with this even after I painted it. Oh, come on, focus. Focus. You can do it. There. Okay. You can see around the eye where I deliberately went back in and kind of did some watery gray to soften off the eyes. So same thing here. Just kind of deliberately soften it off. I'm going to get a little bit of this gray and use it there. And then I'm going to really water down this gray and use it underneath my bunny here. Now that this is fully dry, it'll let me do a little bit crisper line underneath the chin. I'm just gonna pull it down with some little choppy brush strokes type of stuff. Try to blend it in around my flowers. So, a little bit darker there. Okay, and then let's give him some more cheekage. So let's kind of use that gray around the cheek area. Create that. And then again, kind of using the stamp brush, and because that's obviously not blended in, I'm gonna just blend it out so that kind of on either side so that it blends out. That is so much easier with watercolor. That is one of the things that I really like about watercolors, is that that blending is just instantaneous if you do it right, you know. It's so nice. You just have to leave your light areas, and I think that that is the most challenging part being a beginner, is making sure that I'm leaving these light areas, because with acrylics you paint dark to light, or light, you know, so you're not worried about your light areas at all. And so that has been, you know, a challenge for me to rethink how I'm layering and make sure that I'm leaving plenty of light areas. So, how's everybody doing tonight? I didn't even say hi to everybody. I just jumped right in, didn't I? I'm going to get some white gouache. This is where you probably need either white gouache or a Posca pen, or a white, like a Uniball Signo pen or something like that, where you can add your whites in, unless you're just like, you know, super watercolorist and left all your whites like you're supposed to. You didn't answer my question. How's everybody doing?
Well, I started to, and then you went off
Oh, sorry.
on something, so I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay.
I have no idea how everybody's doing. No. They're doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hanging in there for
They're enjoying the show. Enjoying the instruction.
watercolor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have like 3 people watching, or or less than normal?
We have 9.
9? Okay, that's better. That's
Yeah.
better.
3 times more.
Oh my gosh, this does not want to open. Look at my
Righty
thing.
tighty,
It's
lefty
like it's
loosey.
twisting. Well, I have nothing to grip it onto. It's gonna just, it's like, come on. It's gonna break the
Is the paint go
tube.
everywhere?
I know. Come on. my gosh, I don't know.
Running under some hot water or something?
I don't know. I have some white watercolor in here. I can use my white watercolor. The difference between the white watercolor and the gouache watercolor is just that the white the watercolor has less pigment in it. The binders are usually the same. I mean, watercolors, most of them will use gum arabic, but some, like 4, use a synthetic Oxide, and then there's other brands that use honey as their binder, but they're all pretty much intermixable, and gouache is just opaque watercolor. So if you're using white gouache, but if you have titanium white watercolor, then you just use that, because it's just basically the same as the white gouache. It just doesn't have as much pigment in it. You got it open?
Not yet.
Oh, that's
but
fine.
I need to use the little opener thing.
Okay. Thank you. I think maybe using a clamp, one of those, what am I thinking? Like a pliers, that's the word. All right, so I'm going to use my white here. Thin it out. It busted out the bottom? Great.
Got it on my fingers.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to add some highlights there to the eyes. Oh, cute. And then anywhere where you might want some, you know, I might add some little hairs over the top of the edge of my ears there. And again, if you're doing this, you know, old school, or not old school, but, you know, like true watercolorist, purist style, then you would mask out any of these areas that you want pure white and not use the gouache or watercolor paint like I am. Okay, going back in now, adding my brighter highlight there. Oh, he's so cute. And then let's add some little highlights around I might even add a little bit of white in my flowers here. There's a little bleed through of that purple. Add a little bit of that white and then come back in with my Naples yellow. And dab that on. Okay, now let's go ahead and maybe do a little Cerulean Blue or Ultramarine Blue on those aster and add kind of a second layer of petals. They're a little bit darker. Kind of like what we did with the roses, where we, you know, added another layer. I feel like I probably could have left that first layer of the lavender flowers a little bit softer, so that that was a little bit more noticeable, but it's close enough. All right, I'm going to go a little bit, kind of dry brush now. So everything's dry and my brush is pretty dry, and I can add some texture that way too. All right, let's add my little tiny whiskers. I'm going to thin out this Jane's Gray very, very thin. And use a thin brush here and just go out from the kind kind of right around the nose, sort of this whole area here. And just pull a bunch of whiskers out in different directions. Keeping my brush strokes really thin. You can use a liner brush. You can use, with this one I used a 005 pen, so very fine nibbed pen to do my whiskers. So I'll go ahead and overlap them a little bit, so some of them go in different directions. And then they have some over the eyelids too, or usually like up in here there's some. Coming out. And just use a little tip of the brush and add little details wherever you want, okay? Get it as fancy as you want. Now you could left it, you know, without the whiskers, or, you know, use your pen for the whiskers, like I did, you know, that makes it easier. I'm gonna kind of darken up my eyes there. But there's your little bunny. Super cute. Very easy. I didn't end up having to do another coat. In my original, I had to do a second coat in my bunny ears. So, you know, depending on how dark that pigment goes on at first, you may have to go back in and add more color to the inside of your ears. I did end up doing 2 coats on my chin area. But, oh, there's our little bunny. Super cute. Look how he turned out. Right? Very easy. Now, for even easier, I'm going to do our watercolor butterflies. And I did these 2 different ways. So you can just choose your favorite colors and do your butterflies with your, you know, favorite colors of watercolor. You don't have to have fancy colors. Some of your like regular watercolor sets will have granulating colors. So the colors like Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna are usually granulating. Not very many reds are granulating, but a lot of the browns will granulate, and like Cobalt Teal will granulate, and then a lot of some of the specialty greens will granulate. But if you have a color that does granulate and a color that doesn't, you can mix the 2 together and make a new color that granulates. So, you know, you can use Ultramarine Blue in all of your butterflies and make them all granulate that way. Burnt or lavender granulates, and also the titanium, so buff titanium and gray titanium both granulate. So they don't granulate a lot, like it's not super noticeable, but they will. So you can add those to your colors to help, you know, if you want more of that texture that I'm going to get in mine. So just all that to say, you don't have to go out and buy the really fancy watercolor sets to get this effect. So this one, I did all of the bodies with the same color and then chose different colors for the wings. So that's one way of doing it, and that unifies the whole thing. This one, I just chose a set of colors that basically went together and did each butterfly with a different color. So Pyrrolite, this one is Lunar Blue, this one's Tundra Violet, and this one is Deep Sea Green. The only one that's not Daniel Smith is this one. That was Schminke color, okay? And the one thing that I will say is when you're picking your color to do your butterfly, if you're going to use a light color like yellow, you're probably going to need to use a second color that's darker so that the body shows up. I found that the bodies look better if they're dark. So you need a color that's dark and and a lighter version, or just thin out whatever color it is. Like in this case, you know, thin it out. I think I like this one the best. This one I added too much color right at first, so you can see I don't have any light areas. Like it all looks pretty dark. So I don't love this one, but I like the rest of these three. This one I had to go back in and do another coat to add some separation between the wings and lift off some of the area in through here and darken up some areas. This one that is how it looked when I first did it, and this one is one coat also. So that's what we're going to shoot for. These are all one coat butterflies here. All right. I don't know why I'm messing with that, but I was going to show you here too. What you can do is do some tests beforehand to see what colors you have, if they, you know, are going to granulate, what other colors you're going to mix with them, and see if there's one of the colors that you really like that goes with all the other colors. So that's what I found with the Indian yellow. It kind of goes, or Indian red, I mean, it kind of went with all the other colors and mixed really well. And so I used it as the main color for all of these, the main body color. And I think we're going to just do ours however we want to on this one. So I've got a bunch of different butterflies drawn out here. You probably can't see them much because of the water, the light. So let's zoom in a little bit. Whoops. Come on. Okay. That's, yeah, we can start up here. Okay. All right, so let's try to do the Pyrrolite one, because that was my favorite. And again, Pyrrolite is a Daniel Smith color, but it's very similar to the Indian red in some ways. Mahogany Brown is also in the Schminke colors, is similar, but it's just got its own kind of thing going on. Just really like it. So I'm going to use it. And I'm going to thin it out. Get kind of a dark color to start with, but make sure it's kind of fluid. I found when I didn't like certain things that I want to let you know to avoid. One is doing the body too thick and too dry, so that it dries immediately before you can do the next step. So make sure when you put this on that this layer is dark, but that it is, you can always add more layers to it. So just put it on fairly thick. You're going to do like a little triangle for the head, and then another like a diamond shape for the body that's a little bit bigger. This is where all the wings are going to attach, and then your tail, however long you want to do it. Okay? And again, make sure that this is pretty fluid. Then I'm going to get a little bit bigger brush here. I'm going to use the 5 round here. Then I'm going to wet down my wings. You could wet your wings first if you wanted to. I found that it was easier for me to do this after. I'm trying not to touch that center area. I'm trying to get like the back half of the wings done. And again, make sure that this does not dry before you do this. So do it quickly if you can. You can always touch it up later, but it's easier. It kind of does better if you just don't fuss with it once the magic starts. So, all right, so I filled that in, and now when I touch into that and connect the water, it's going to move. Okay. Connect into that body. And then what I can do is kind of help it out and pull, or I can take my Pyrrolite and drop in and charge that area so that more of the color goes out farther. Okay. Let me Get a little bit thinned out paint here. Thin it out. And I can charge it from the tips of the wings back too. So I can take it and kind of add some of that color back in here. And I can move it around. Now once this is, since this is all pretty evenly wet, it's gonna all kind of merge and move. All right, I don't want to touch it much more than that, okay? But what I will do is add just a few little dots of detail to kind of jazz it up. So I'm going to come in through here and dab in. It's going to move a lot, so I have to just kind of know that. I can wait a little bit if I don't want it to move so much, if I don't want it to explode out so far. And I can dab in. From there, maybe there's a little bit coming down here. Okay, we'll see what that does. We'll let it dry, and it'll continue to move, and as it dries, it's going to separate out. Let me go ahead and do my little antenna. Very fine. Okay. And you can do your antenna with a pen too, so you don't have to do it with the pen, with a brush if you're not comfortable with the brush. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit more. Isn't that fun? It's super easy. I just love this. All right, so let's pick another color. Let's show you the yellow one. I really feel like it was very effective. So we'll use, I don't remember what color I used. I think maybe I used this one. But I feel like I want to use maybe a little bit of gold. So let's use a little bit of Quin Gold and Hansa Yellow Light here. And I want to thin it out quite a bit. I want it to go on pretty light. Okay, so I've got that ready. Let's do this little one with it. And I'll go ahead and use the Indian red this time. Do the head and body, make sure that my paint is fluid. And it's pretty soupy too. Like I've got it kind of loaded up. It's like if I tipped it, it might run a little bit. Like it's got a lot of paint in there. So it's ready to go. I'll go ahead and put that color in, and I'm gonna try to really actually do it a little bit lighter than that. Oops. Shoot. Well, just jumped out there. I'm going to put the yellow in on the tips where I want it. And then as soon as I touch it to that middle part, it's going to move. Try not to touch the tail because I don't want the tail to bleed out. I just want it to kind of bleed out from that little thoracic area. All right, and I'm going to get a little bit thicker Indian red and dab that in there. That one won't move as far, but it'll bleed out a little bit. And I'm just going to let it do its thing. And then this one, let's go ahead and give it like maybe a couple of dots. So let's go ahead and mix the Indian yellow with some of the yellow. We'll do a couple of dots there and there. Do a couple of dots here and here. It's really bleeding out, so we'll get some really cool effects. Now it's kind of going out on this side more than the other side. So I want it to go out here. I can kind of come back in with some color and pull it this way. What were you saying, huh?
We have a question when
Okay.
you have a opportunity.
Yeah, go for it.
Question is, if you have a dry watercolor background,
Right.
how does it work to try and paint this butterfly over it? Will it activate the background too much and blend?
No. Here, let's do it this way. I'll show you. So I have a dry butterfly. So say I want to add spots to him or add another color to it. What I'll do is just wet that part of the butterfly that I want it to go into. I got a little bit of water right up there. I don't want it to connect to that. So I just do it just like I would do on a dry canvas. You just have to make sure you don't wash too much back and forth over that area, because you can lift the color, if it's not stained, if it's a lifting color. So, but you can wet this down just like we did before. Try to get it right up to the edge there. Can't see. Okay. And then say I want to add some spots to this one. I can do that. And it'll just bleed out just like as if it was there all along, and bleed out just as nicely. I think I had an area there that was dry. It's not. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and if I wanted more of the center area to move in, I could darken up there too, but I'm good with that. Now, if I want like my color not to bleed out as much, I can use a thicker amount of paint, and it'll stay a little bit more localized. Like this bled out completely. So if I let it dry just a little bit more, it won't bleed out as much. Right? Really fun. Okay, so that's how you would do that. And the paint's gonna only go where you add the water or you paint it on, on a dry background, which is nice. So you can go in, like say I want to go in here and add a little bit more detail there. I can get my green and I can, wet it down. There we go. And I can go in where I want it darker. So I want a little bit more separation there. And then kind of do the same thing that I did with the bodies, like this is the body area, say, and just pull that color down where I want it to go. And wherever I wet, it will go to and stop where it's not wet. So if I want to make sure I don't have any, like, if I want a smooth blend, then I'll pull it all the way down and wet the whole area so that it blends smoothly all the way down. And if I don't want a hard line on this top part, I can come back up here with a little bit of water and just kind of soften off that edge just a little bit so that it kind of smooths out a little bit. Or if I want lines, I can come back in and do some lines. If I want them to be a little softer, what I can do is, come back in and kind of go over either side with a little bit of soft brush, or I can slightly dampen my paper and then do my lines with a slightly damp paper, and they'll bleed a little bit, but they won't bleed as much. So lots of different ways of manipulating it. Now this paper is kind of slightly damp from before, so I'm adding my little darker circles around here, and hopefully it'll bleed out a little bit for me. And I can take just my damp brush and kind of pull off any of the extra stuff that I don't want. If it's going too far or whatever, I can kind of control it that way, just with that damp brush. But again, you don't want to over manipulate it. I found that less is more, especially with these butterflies. I kind of like them best when I just left them alone and did them, or maybe did like a second coat like this over them to add some details after the initial layer dried. Okay, and you can see this one is kind of has bled out in interesting ways. It's still slightly damp, so if we add a little bit darker color now where we have our spots, ooh, it's still bleeding pretty well. That was wetter than I thought it was. It'll bleed out. Okay. Take some of that off. There we go. All right, we'll see what that does. And see, it's going to stop wherever the paper is already sort of dry too. So that's where you get kind of some interesting techniques as well, or textures and things, you know, because like you can see that this half of it was sort of already dry back here. Now if I want to move it into those areas, I can add just a little bit of water around them. Make sure I get a little smoother blend. All right, and then I'm going to, whoops, that was Indian red, right? I had that right. I had that right. I'm going to add a little bit thicker Indian red right there in the body, just because it kind of bled out all that color. And just darken that back up. Okay, let's see. Okay, we've got time for a few more. Let's go ahead and do this one. I'm going to do kind of a nice pink in this area. And this is another way of doing it. I don't have to wet down the paper. I can kind of just put the color down. And then while that's wet, and before it gets a chance to dry, just add some water to the bottom area of it and it'll bleed down. Especially in smaller areas, it's pretty easy to do it that way. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of my red. That was Opera Pink that I started with, and then I'm adding the quinacridone rose. See, I kind of want a little bit darker right at the top there. And then I'm going to let that dry, and we'll do one down here and then come back to it. So let's do a blue butterfly. So I did like how, let's go ahead and just continue with those darker colors. So I'm going to use the Pyrrolite here, and then I'll do the rest of the butterfly with a blue. So here, oh, I need my little antenna. So I've got my body started there. make sure I really charge it up with a lot of color so that when I put my blue on it moves. So this one was like Cobalt Teal that I added another green to. This one's Lavender. And this one was Cerulean Blue, which I think I like that one. So let's go ahead and use Cerulean Blue. It's also a granulating blue. I can get a little bit of my Ultramarine Blue in there with it too. And I'm gonna start with just like a very, very light coat. Almost just water. Come right up to that color, but don't go over it. And I want this very watery, so go ahead and, you know, make it more watery than you think you need. I mean, it shouldn't be like rolling, you know, and dripping, but it should have, that paper is going to soak in a lot of the water, so. And you want to be able to do both wings before it starts moving, because otherwise it's going to pull like this one, where it'll pull it to one side only, because that kind of side started it first. Okay, so let's go ahead and quickly dab both sides there into that part. Ooh, that's so pretty, isn't it? I love the blue with that brownish red color. It's such a nice combo. Okay, nice. And then we'll get some of our blue and charge it in this direction from the wingtips. And again, make sure we have enough water in our paper. If we don't have a lot of water, it's not going to move at all. It's just going to stay kind of where, if the paper's too dry. So you need to make sure you're adding enough water when you're first putting down that layer. And I can kind of pull it where I want it to go too. Okay, and then if I've got any things that I want to smooth out, I can kind of just run that damp brush through and, you know, move the paint around a little bit, move that water around so that I'm getting good mingling of the colors. You might want sort of a line between the two petals there. And then let's go ahead and add a little bit more of that Pyrrolite, really fluid. Try to get it to move out into the blue a little bit more. Can even add a little bit of water. Get it to push into the other areas. And if it's not going far enough, like this area may be a little bit dry, I can kind of wet that back down a little bit. Although wetting it down is going to push into other areas, so it may do the opposite. It may push that out instead of accept it. So I can kind of pull that color into the area where I want it to go. Okay, that's pretty, isn't it? I like that color. All right, that's pretty dry. Let's go ahead and I'm going to use some Goethite, some buff titanium, and just kind of do very light brown. that one, and then we'll use some, or maybe we'll stick with our Pyrrolite, or maybe some Jane's Gray, and do some dabs in the wings here and add some detail, some spots. Just one of those little moths. Right, we okay to keep going? How's everybody doing?
Everybody's watching you.
Okay.
But it's been tongue-in-cheek requested to change the term to bloom out
Bloom out,
instead of bleed out.
bleed out,
Because that,
bloom out. That's true. It's the more technical term for
because
it.
that poor bunny's eyes were bleeding out.
That's funny. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. Okay. Bloom out. Yeah. Bloom out. Instead of bleed out. Check. At least as regards the bunny.
It's kind of like my midsection is blooming out from all the cookies I've been eating.
Okay. Just adding a little bit more gray there at the bottom to finish off that little moth guy. Yeah, it's interesting how more pink that one turned out than that one. I don't know why, but I feel like that color stayed kind of closer, stayed a little bit more concentrated, didn't move out as much. So if you wanted more pink, you could, you know, add that in later, obviously. I'm going to add a little bit darker color just right along that line there. And then pull it down so that it's blended in. Just kind of softened off that color so it wasn't quite so bright. And you can always go back into, like, later after the fact and use a pencil or something. Like on this one, I used a pen here to do some lines on it. So you can take a watercolor pencil, or not a watercolor pencil necessarily, just any kind of colored pencil. This is my Prismacolor, and add little lines, add your little shadows. You know, it's not necessary, but it can add a little more detail if you're into that and make it feel a little bit more finished. Clean up some of your edges, whatever. I found that just a little bit of pencil, I didn't like it when I did too much pencil, so it's there's kind of a fine line, but I really liked just a little bit of pencil. Now, if it's, you know, perfect and you like it the way it is, you can leave it too. So, like this one, I don't think I'm gonna do anything to because I really like it the way it is. This one, I was trying to kind of fix the fact that it was just too green all over, too dark all over. I don't know that there's anything I can do about that one. So this one I don't love, so I could go back in with pencil on it and try to, do some. I've also got brush pens that, are like darker brown and different things. You can come back in. This is what I did with my travel. When I did my travel, I would come back in with I would like do my watercolor initial layer, and then I would come back in with my pen and just add just little, not necessarily like everywhere, but just little details. I don't know if I love this. It feels a little too much. I think I like the pencil better for these, but kind of skipping around the edge, letting it be a little bit loose. Kind of helps it not look too forced. Oops. So this one, I don't know. This one may be a wash, and that's okay too. It's all about exploration. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And you don't know until you try. So kind of have to just, I have found with this watercolor, especially because I'm so new to it, that I've just had to kind of go, well, we'll just see how this goes. And a lot of them, especially when I'm learning here, a lot of these I don't love. A lot of it I don't really love how it turned out. So using a little bit of water over the top of this to bleed that. Now this is a permanent pen, but the ink is not fully dry, so I can kind of bleed it out.
Well,
and that
what
helps.
was that pen that you just used?
That was the Pitt. No, that was the Uni Pin Fine Line. It's waterproof, fade proof. It's the brush. So there's a brush set that I got on Amazon. I'll make sure that I put it in my Amazon cart or in my Amazon watercolor supplies list. And most of this stuff is all in that list on Amazon. If you go and click on the link down in the description for Amazon, there's a watercolor list. So there he is with a little bit of pen. And definitely helped to kind of wash off some of that pen. I feel like I made the head way too big on that. He looks like he's looking at you. I like that one a little bit better where it's a little softer. The pen or the pencil kind of matches that lavender color pretty well, and didn't add too many lines, just kind of tried to enhance. So I think this is more effective than this one with the butterflies. I kind of think the pen is a little heavy. But I mean, if you like that look, I mean, I could definitely see that. I've bought stuff that has, the pen kind of outline with butterflies and stuff. So it's just a different look. It's not what I prefer. So, but you do what looks good to you. That's the fun thing about this kind of exploration, doing this new stuff, is just to kind of figure out your own style. And I feel like this is a lot easier way. Oh shoot, I got a little bit of, let me see if I can lift that off. Okay, so if you do that, this is a good, okay, I got most of that off, but there's a product called Bleed Proof White that you'll want to get. And I use this on my paper. It blends into the paper like magic. It's crazy. So I can touch up, if that didn't lift off, I could have painted this on that area and it would have just disappeared it. All right, I think I'm going to end there because I think we've done, quite a few things. I've showed you some techniques. You get the idea. So you take it and run with it and do, do your own thing with it. I'd love to see your butterflies and little bunny if you try these. let me know and share them with me. All my links down in the description to my social media. Probably the best one is to share it on in my Facebook group in Thankful Art. It's got a good community there, and the number one rule is to be nice. So you get kicked out if you're mean, and I mean it.
So where can they find some more tutorials from you?
What?
Where can they find more tutorials from you?
On my website. So if you want to go and see, I have a few other watercolor tutorials, not very many, but there's a few other ones, and then I have literally 1,000 or more acrylic tutorials on YouTube and Patreon. So, but my website has them all, thankfulart.com. If you want to put that up, that website link there we go. Thankfulart.com, and if you go to the tutorials tab, it'll show all of my tutorials. You can put in a search for, any topic, and I've pretty much painted them all at this point. Most of them, at least, feels like. And yeah, and there's a bunch of lessons. Let me show you what we're doing on Patreon. So Patreon, right now, we have traceables available for folks. I'm just trying to see what I did with that white. I got it on something, so I'm going to find it somewhere.
This right here. This tube.
No, right here. I put out some white there, and I could see where I touched it on something, so something's got it somewhere. Has white. Something has white on it. It's probably on the bottom of this, maybe. I don't know. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. The patreon.com/AngelaFineArt. The link is also down in the description. Or you can just go to my website, and it will link to Patreon, where you can sign up if you're interested. But I will have traceables for these two for you. I'll do a bunch of different butterfly shapes, so you can do them, and you can, if you're doing it on watercolor paper, you can use your water-soluble Cerulean transfer paper and transfer on your designs. I have tutorials on how to use traceables. You can erase it just like, I did the pencil. So really easy to use a traceable and get a head start on your paintings that way. So those are available for the $5 tier on Patreon. And then for the $15 tier, we have a weekly tutorial where I work through a project for several weeks until we finish it. So right now we're kind of almost to the end of this project. We're going to be adding butterflies and more flowers to and finishing off our snake here with this Year of the Snake dark florals. So this is our challenge tutorial. We started in March, and we'll be finishing it this month. So and we've got tons of really, really cool, very detailed paintings that we've done with that challenge level tier with our patrons, and it's really, really fun. I love it because it kind of you get to see the design portion. So the very first week of this one, what we did is take photographs and move them around and draw our own design, figure out what we wanted to do with several different elements. And then last week we did a little bit more. We kind of took out the tablet and drew digitally with the tablet on top of our finished photo, or our photo of our painting, to see where we wanted to add our other flowers before we painted them. So I show you all that stuff, kind of things that I don't get to do on our regular YouTube channel. We do a much deeper dive into things like design and showing you how to make your own compositions and develop a painting from start to finish. So anyhow, if you're interested in that, that's available as well. But we've still got our regular Tuesday night free tutorials, and thank you to our patrons who help make these tutorials still free for everybody. It's really awesome to have that support ongoing from everybody, and we're really glad that you are joined us tonight or today if you're watching the replay for this. Hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, you can share it with me on socials. I'd love to see your versions. Is that it? Ooh, little cowbell. Sweet.
Super chat.
Super chat. I love it. Very cool.
Yeah,
While you're doing that, I'll add a few more leaves to our butter or thing down here.
We had a generous gift from Pat. It says thank you
Oh,
so much, Angela and Mark, for another wonderful evening of painting. Love seeing the watercolor techniques. You both are the best.
thank you, Pat. That's so sweet. Thank you. Very cool. Okay. Oh, I guess I won't. Never mind.
We're done.
Yeah, we're done. We're done. Mark's. Yeah, it's good. We're almost at
We're
the
good there.
2 hour mark. So.
Yeah.
The best part of working with watercolors is you don't have to wash your brushes out. I can just do a little swishy swish on here and they're good. Not gonna lie, that's a big draw. No, I just really like. Now, if you wanted to do these and you only have acrylics and you don't have watercolors, you can paint on paper with acrylics just fine. You would thin it out the same way. They're gonna bleed some. With acrylics, there's not going to get that really soft blend because acrylics pretty much stay where you put them. So you're not going to get the same exact effects. You're not going to get the blooming and things like that you might get with watercolor, but you can still get a really soft, pretty effect with acrylics on paper. So try it and see what you can get. You know, you might be able to get some of the same type of look with acrylics and not have to, go out and buy watercolors. I for sure would say I would definitely do any of the bunny with acrylics, and you could get almost the same exact look with acrylics on the bunny. The butterflies are a little bit more, relying on the movement of the watercolor, and so they're a little bit maybe more specific to watercolor. You might not get as much of that look with acrylics, but definitely this one I think you could do with acrylics watered down and get a very similar effect. So anyhow, just to let you know, I should have said that at the very beginning. So, but anyhow, thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.